Welcome to another podcast. This is something I filmed 3 years ago, roughly 3 years ago. It is on my main channel. It's been on there a while, but I wanted to re-edit it a bit and upload it. It's an interview with a Dr. Seth Kadish, and it's one of those interviews that I was a newbie at podcasting, so when you see the video, it is a few years ago. I was a bit overweight, Well, not overweight, but my face still looked a bit fatter than it was, because I was still in the process of losing weight, and my confidence wasn't the best. I've edited a few of the cringy things out that I was talking, which didn't make a difference to the video, but this, to me, will be the highlight of my content creating journey. A great bloke. He does a lot of work. He's done 3 books now. The newest one was in 2024, and the links will be below to all these things. The information and stuff. He's worked with a lot of people, a lot of famous people, and the story is that I sent a tweet out on Twitter. At the time it's called Twitter, asking if anyone wants to be interviewed, just to see if anyone was interested to be interviewed, and I got a reply back. If you want to skip straight to the interview, the time skips below, just so you don't have to cope with this talking. And I wasn't expecting to get any replies. It's just, well, I'll give it a go. Why not just see what happens, ask about a bit. And this interview, right, when I started doing these podcasts years ago, my inspiration was to interview someone in the field of mental health, high up in the field of mental health, and I thought it would take a few years to get there. I'm not going to do it overnight, and this is the interview that I aim to do in a few years' time, not expecting it to be straight away kind of thing, So I was so lucky, and I have recently, the past week, I've been in contact, and we're going to be doing a second interview, but it won't be for a few months, and a follow up. And I'll just watch this video back, editing it, and it's more powerful now than it was when I first 3 years ago, because the stuff I'm hearing him say didn't sink in at first, but now that my mind is a bit more clearer on this kind of stuff, it's soaking in. It's like, oh my God, those are powerful words. So please watch it all the way through if you can. Or if you can't, just go back to it tomorrow or the day after and just watch the rest of it. YouTube will remember where you left off. It is powerful, and yeah. And check the links out, But anyway, I'm going to leave you to the video. Don't forget, this was filmed years ago when I was a bit different and not so confident, and you'll see what I mean. Just a brief introduction on yourself, just so people can get to know you a bit.
All right. So my name is Seth Kadish. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist here in America. I've been at it for over a quarter of a century, which makes me sound old, and rightly so. I'm currently the director of group therapy at a well-regarded program in America called PCH. I do private practice and coaching. I do, again, all sorts of group work. It's kind of a specialty for me. The other things I would add is I am particularly interested in something called patterns work, which I can talk a bit about, and addressing people's negative patterns of thought, emotion, and behavior. And then I would like to give a plug to a book that I just finished and came out about 2 months ago. It's a memoir, and it's called Homeboys. It's available on Amazon as a ebook or a paperback. And it's about a year in my life, many years ago, working with probation youth. I'm not sure if you call them probation youth in England, but that's basically boys who end up in juvenile hall, who have stolen, committed various crimes, gone into the gang world, and It's the story of my beginnings as a psychologist and how I got to understand and bond and really come to care about those boys. So homeboysamazon.com. That's my brief introduction.
Wow. I will put links below in the description to links to your books and stuff. And
Thank you.
yes,
That'd be great.
and me, I'm Darren Keenan. I live in Dover, England, and I have been made homeless 15 years ago due to depression and anxiety. So now I live at a place where, to help me, well, it's like an Emmaus, it's a charity where 20 of us live here. We work for the charity shop, we work in charity, help build ourselves up. I've been going through counselling for many years, and my anxiety is getting less and less and less. I'm learning how to cope with it. But when I was made homeless, depression got that bad. I was trapped in a well I couldn't get out of. All reality didn't exist. I didn't ask for help because it didn't exist in my mind, and I got evicted. And YouTube for me has helped me a lot. I'm a people person. I love learning about people all over the world. That's why I'm so grateful for this. I wasn't expecting this, but I'm so grateful. This is something I aspire to in about 5 years' time.
Oh,
And it's I am honoured, honestly. So that's a bit about me. Right then, so I haven't done much research into this. If I plan stuff, it never works out, and my anxiety, I get a bit flustered. So sometimes I like to go from the heart and just say things and see how it goes. That's the way I like doing stuff.
Absolutely.
My question is, because I read a lot about when you're working with youth, and is it youth? People have been youth offending and stuff, prison stuff, youth.
Right.
How did you cope with the personalities and?
Well, I did. And just as a quick note, after I spent 5 years working with probation youth, a year with the boys, which I write about in the book, and 4 years with teenage girls who were very violent, by the way. I was telling somebody I just did a supervision for group trainees a little bit earlier today, and was telling them that in the group home I worked in, it was a large-sized group home. It had 50 girls at any given time. We often had riots. Literally riots, and they were violent, and I learned an awful lot. So I'm going to answer your question in a moment. I followed that experience up by working 5 years in maximum security prison. And I have to tell you, though I saw some pretty incredible things there, generally speaking, and Darren, no joke, there was less violence that I saw in prison than I saw with teenage girls. A lot more blood got spilled, crazily enough. So I was on a learning curve when I first started working with the boys. I had done a couple of years' work prior to that, working with foster care youth and some private clients when I began. I guess I learned to keep my cool by just, slogging through it daily. When you're working 5 days a week, you come up with so many situations. Some of the boys could be really nasty and try to push buttons, and what would upset me at a point became more familiar to me, and I was able to take, not always, quite frankly, but often I could take my ego out of it and realize this wasn't personal against me. Don't get offended. They're simply lashing out. It's what they do. So over time, I did better and better coping with people's hyper emotionality and threats of aggression and verbal aggression. But of course, none of us are perfect. I did, like you said about yourself, I did better, though not perfect. And by the way, I just want to make a comment. I appreciate what you shared about wrestling with depression and anxiety. Clearly, I work with and have worked with many, many people who struggle with that. And I think it's very admirable that you're just forthcoming and willing to talk about it and share your own experiences and get help. So salute to you, and good to hear that.
Bad time when I felt like I was trapped down a well and I couldn't get out, and I just locked myself away. That's why I was evicted.
the reason why I do YouTube is to try, because I've done a few series for myself about my mental health, about what I went through, but what I want to be the person who would have helped me that time. It could have dragged me out that well. I was hoping that one day I could actually, if someone's like that, I could help them get out give them a tool to get out of the well.
Right.
But what tip would you give? What advice? Maybe one sentence. What would you say to someone to hopefully help them
with depression,
get out of that place and try and at least help themselves? I know it's not easy, but yeah.
I have a response for you. So I actually ran for about 2 years a depression management group. And I often referenced a book called The Depression Cure by Dr. Stephen Ilardi. I believe it came out, I want to say between 2005, 2010. It came out back in the day. And I really liked his simple wisdom. He is, I'm assuming he's still around, a professor and doctor out of Kansas. And what he advised his clients to do is to follow 6 particular steps. And they involve different areas of life, including socializing, including getting some sun, which might be more difficult in a European or northern climate, but to try to get sun. If not, he has specific recommendations about lamps that are on the market. Excuse me. He talked about, of course, addressing, which sounds like you have done, the cognitive, right? To look at the negativity, depressive thinking, and to address that usually with cognitive behavioral therapy. Let's see, he also spoke about the benefits of exercise. Very important. I worked with a psychiatrist years ago, and the first thing he insisted of all clients, whatever their diagnosis was, bipolar disorder, PTSD, schizophrenia, various forms of depression, was you have to do some exercise every day. And then also diet has importance. And in the book, he talks about omega. I want to say omega-6, I think, is what he referenced. So those are a couple of tips right there. And sometimes, Darren, people dismiss that. They say, well, that's very simplistic, just what diet and exercise and talking to people. And sure, that's the basic way to address depression. I don't know about your case. Sometimes people have what they would call refractory depression, right? Which is very, very long-term and extremely deep depression. And then they talk about, you may be familiar with ketamine, transmagnetic stimulation, TMS, ECT, electroconvulsive therapy, and those are a bit more radical. So that would be more second line defense versus first line. But there are many ways to address depression. And I think the key thing, and I'm going to ask you a question in a moment, is the importance of knowing that you're not alone. I mean, the millions of people who are suffering depression, it's unfortunately universal. And so sometimes people go into the shame pattern of what's wrong with me and I have this issue. But look around and you'll see so many people struggling with anxiety and depression. What's been your experience as far as reaching out or the realization that many other people are struggling with that as well?
It's hard because I know a few people who are going through the same kind of thing, not so in depth with what I was going through, but it's just because the way I see it is people were trying to help me when I was depressed, but I blanked it all. I wouldn't listen. It's how I think educating people. It's like I was diagnosed with diabetes type 2 about a year ago, and I've been living with that. But people were telling me that stop what I'm doing because I'll end up getting diabetes, but I wouldn't listen to them. But if I educated myself into learning about it, I would have done something about it. I would have actually. So there's a few people I know who could be diabetic because of overweight. I mean, I was 18 stone about 3 years ago. Now I'm 14 and a half. But it's just trying to think, well, I can't tell them. But I said to them, here's a website to look at. Check this out. Read this. Educate yourself. Because that's the message I want to put across in my videos as well when I do more mental health videos, is to educate, just to say to people, look at the links to make your own choices. I can't say do this, don't do this. Read about it. You can learn the dangers of what's happening to your body, what you eat too much sugar. It's like open my mind up a lot more. I don't know. It's a strange. I'm still in the learning process.
Well, I mean, I really get that. When you were saying that, it reminded me of. Let me back up a second. So part of my background is a number of years spent as the clinical director of what they call dual diagnosis, a program in Malibu, one of those programs you hear about, though a very for real program. Though it was in Malibu, a great program called Milestones. And the reason that I mention that is dual diagnosis, for people watching this who don't know, means that somebody has an addiction issue, usually or often alcohol, methamphetamine, whatever it might be, and a diagnosable psychiatric disorder, anxiety, depression, bipolar, so forth. And so, you know what, let me go back because I was starting to lose my thought. It was something you said that I wanted to touch on. Oh, I know what it was. So with sobriety, because I work with a lot of people in recovery, I don't know if you're in recovery, you know anything about it, right? But the idea is attraction and not promotion, that you don't tell somebody what to do. You simply share your own experience if they want to hear it. And I imagine that you've done that as well. People who might be interested, well, this is what I've done, is what's been like for me, rather than you should do this or you should do that. Unless they were very specifically asking you, hey, Darren, what would you recommend? Here's my scenario, here's my situation, and maybe you have a word of advice or coaching. But yes, I think just getting out there and sharing your story as many people as possible, again, it kind of normalizes it for other people, makes it a universal, takes away the shame, and says, he's a nice guy, he's a good guy, he's dealing with it. You know what? I can handle this too. I can deal with this too. I'm not an outcast.
So is this something you've always wanted to do when you were younger? Is it something you aspired to do? Is it?
I have an interesting story about that. Well, I'll share with you. No is the short answer.
Okay.
So I wasn't against it. So coming from Brooklyn, I grew up in the 60s and 70s. And if you know anything about Brooklyn, it's changed a lot now. But the reputation then was basically lower middle class. I hate to say like the gangster movies, but my neighborhood, if you've watched the movie Goodfellas.
Yes.
Right, that was my neighborhood at that time.
Oh, wow.
Yes. Okay. Now, the thing is, this is going to sound kind of odd, Darren, couldn't be safer. When you grow up in an area like that, you're very safe. We did not have crime. We did not have any issues at all. But it's not a place where anybody knew about therapy or psychiatry. You know, if you had a problem, go to the bar and have a drink or talk to your friend, or there's no such thing as those kind of problems. And also part of it was, we're talking about the 60s and 70s. Things have changed a lot. So I originally moved out to California in the 80s. And my goal, my interest at that time, when I got out of college and was in the work world, was entertainment. I worked for a film company, I worked for a talent agent, I worked for an advertising company, and I was pursuing writing. I've written 2 books now. I always wanted to be a writer. And so had a little bit of success, enough to make me pack my bags and moved out. And then we fast forward to the 90s, and I was feeling a little bit at a loss and not sure what to do with my life. The writing was going okay, but it wasn't at the level I wanted it to be at in terms of making me any real money or enough money. And I just was feeling something missing. So I did something, I had inspiration, and I did something that I share with people because maybe they can do the same thing. So what I did was, this was at the beginning of the internet. I reached out to people I knew and people I hardly knew. I asked people who were gay, who were straight, who were black, who were white, who I just met, who know me forever. I wanted a real diversity. And about 10 people total. And I said to them, I want you to tell me what you think I should do, like in a word or less, and I want you to write it, either through one of those new email things, right? Or on a note or something, but I wanted to actually have it. And the damnedest thing, 10 out of 10, they only wrote 2 things. Literally, I thought people were going to write like lawyer, entertainment, acting, writing, entrepreneur. I didn't know what they write. but 10 out of 10 wrote either teacher or therapist.
Hmm.
So now the light bulb went off, and I knew nothing. I had not been in therapy, didn't really know anything about it other than the movies. But I worked with a woman at a firm at that point just to kind of make my money to sustain me as a writer. And I tapped her on the shoulder, and she had just started therapy school, so to speak. And I tap her on the shoulder and I say, "Can you tell me the name of your school?" "Why?" "Well, I'm going to enroll." And she started laughing because clearly I was just being my funny self again. I said, "No, you can be a therapist." Yeah. I knew nothing about it. I just had a pull. And I joined the school a few weeks late, and that was 26 years ago. And I've been involved in that world ever since.
I used to work at, this might sound strange, but a theme park in England, Alton Towers. And before then, I wasn't a people person. But working in a place like that, you learn life lessons. You learn that, to work there, you've got to be that kind of person. So ever since then, I've been, wanting to do this kind of thing. I've been wanting to talk to people. If I see someone 20 years old and then someone 80 years old next to each other, I'm thinking, wow, the 60-year difference, what they could teach that 20-year-old, I'm always people watching and thinking, wow, imagining what their stories are like and that kind of stuff, and what their life could be like and what they've lived and stuff, It's ever since then I've been like, even though I had depression and stuff after all that got sorted, I mean, I don't know. It's hard to explain, but I'm just want to educate myself more about people around the world and that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's just totally fascinating. The internet is fascinating to me.
I mean,
chatting to you on the internet. I mean, it's the power of the internet for
exactly.
the good. It's just blows my mind. It's phenomenal.
I get it totally. Something that I discuss with people who want to go into the field or are new in the field. I said, really, all you need, I mean, obviously, you need some caring to want to help people. You just need curiosity, because people are endlessly fascinating. And people who we might dismiss or not pay attention to or not even see, they can have incredible stories, painful, exciting, amazing stories. So I think what you're doing is a really cool thing to do. And yes, if you're just open about it and ask enough questions and have curiosity, you will probably hear some pretty amazing things along the way. So yeah, and just tell you a little bit. I'll tell you a little bit more about the book.
Yeah.
It was a cast of characters, and I obviously had to change the names, but the stories are pretty accurate. I had boys who I had one kid, for argument's sake, who was sharing with me how at age, I think it was 12 or 13, had murdered his first person. You're talking about kids indoctrinated into the LA gang world, and that's part of what they had to do. Other kids who had some form of psychosis, and not to laugh at them, but they said some crazy funny things. I share those anecdotes. I start the book, without giving away too much, about a kid who I just, Darren, I so liked and wanted to help this kid. And I met his mom and his sister, and, my heart was going out to the kid. And then the story, because I tell, the book is broken into sections, where each section is about a character, one of the kids. And then as an overarching structure, it's the different seasons of the year. Anyway, with this one boy who I start talking about initially in the book, very close to him. And then at a point I realized, and in a sense, end the section with how he had completely fooled and manipulated me. So it really is a book for anybody interested in that whole world of either probation kids or psychology, but also for people who are early on in their career, because I share about the mistakes I made, as I got closer to the kids, and I gradually became better able to read them and understand them. But, I definitely had a couple of flubs along the way. And again, like I said, some of them are very entertaining and funny, and some of them are really poignant, and some of them are a little bit not scary to me, but to hear their stories. They grew up, some of them, in such violent places and violent ways. I'm sure you've seen movies and about the LA gang scene, particularly back in the day.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And certainly heard a lot about that working with inmates, but my introduction was working with the boys. But I was never scared of the boys. They were kids, and most of them saw me really as a dad. They even the ones who were oppositional, it was really much more how I was with dad. But because of how and where I had grown up, I was not a stranger to that kind of mentality or that kind of vibe. So that was very
Wow.
helpful as well.
So
Yes.
what is your inspiration? Because after we had the pandemic and the lockdowns, which were, like I don't know how it was in America, but in England, we had about 4, I think. And it was just like a anxiety rush, the first one anyway. But what inspired you and how have you coped through them times?
Yeah. So on a personal and professional note, uh, very, very difficult for myself and everybody else. And as far as people with anxiety, depression, or drug and alcohol use, it just went through the roof, as we all know. On a personal note, something that I found helpful was, Darren, not to ignore the reality of wearing masks and the fear around COVID. And we've all lost either family members or people that we know. I think pretty much everybody I know has, or they've gone through it. But was to look at the silver linings. And this is a conversation I have with a number of clients I work with and even friends as well. Can you see any silver linings? Like, for argument's sake, my world of psychology has exponentially expanded in the sense that we're able to help more people because what you and I are doing, working remotely, which was not a thing, not much of a thing before that. That's a big silver lining. Silver lining for myself and colleagues who you've heard about the world famous Los Angeles traffic. Well, we didn't have to get stuck in that traffic anymore. Or when we did go out, it was greatly reduced. So I think that was very, very helpful and something I'd suggest for everybody to consider, again, without ignoring the reality of COVID and what it's meant. Or the other thing I always like to ask people in any problematic situation, what did you learn? And if people say, I really didn't learn anything. My grandmother died. What can I learn from that? No, hold on. Is there anything you can learn about yourself or people or the world from your negative experience? Another book that I refer to often, and in fact, it was the only book that I gave copies of to these maximum security inmates I work with. At any given time, a third to half my caseload was in for murder or attempted murder. These are pretty serious kind of dudes. The only book that I spoke about frequently and gave copies of was Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. I don't know if you're familiar. Have you heard of the book?
No, but I'll look into it.
Highly recommend it. Let me tell you briefly what it's about and why I recommend it. And again, people watching this, absolutely. In fact, if you're not sure if you should get my book or his book, get his book.
No.
Because it's that powerful a book. So Frankl, the quick story is he was a Jewish Viennese psychiatrist who actually studied a little bit with Freud. He came up in the 20s and 30s. And in 1940, he and his wife and parents and family were all taken by the Gestapo. So Man's Search for Meaning is not so much a Holocaust memoir, but really it's a work of psychology and philosophy about a man who came through Auschwitz in the camps, lost his wife, his parents, everybody was wiped out. He comes out, and we're talking about how situations and life can give you knowledge and learning with an entire philosophy. He invented something called logotherapy, and it was enormously helpful to people who have read the book. I think it's probably close to 10 million copies sold at this point.
Wow.
Something like that. I remember it was really a high number. And one of the key learnings, the 2 key learnings of the book, which I share with people, including these inmates, remember, these guys are stuck in a California penitentiary. I don't know if you've ever been around or seen a prison cell or that kind of environment, but it's just horrific. What words of wisdom can you give somebody who at age 24 is looking at a life sentence?
Oh, yeah.
And so what I would share with them was Frankl's teachings. And the basic 2 things he said were, 1, Man's Search for Meaning. he says it obviously in a more sophisticated, elegant way, but basically you find your own meaning and purpose in life. Maybe in your case, it's sharing your experiences with other people. In my case, it's doing this kind of teaching or writing. For other people, it could be self-oriented, that they're meditators who, try to find inner peace or serenity. And for other people, it's raising a family, whatever it might be. But the other key learning is, and I'm going to reduce it to the simplest form possible, how you see the world is the world. In other words, the one freedom that you have when they take away all your other freedoms, they imprison you, they torture you, they do all that they did to Frankel, is the attitude that you bring to any situation.
Mm.
So I remember there's a little bit in the book, if I remember correctly, where it's, I think, like 5 o'clock in the morning in a cold, freezing Polish winter, and he sees a little bird like on a wire. And so instead of bemoaning his fate and all that, it's like, look at that piece of life, that he had a bit of hope and caring. And he had compassion. Actually, he had compassion for the Nazi prison guards. And he thought, they're caught up in this craziness like I am, rather than I just hate the world. He didn't. So how you view the world determines what the world is. Simple as that. So that is my plug for Viktor Frankl and his book, Man's Search for Meaning.
Wow. Yeah, that's I'll look into that as well. Yeah. The biggest thing I learned from here in England, the lockdowns, was the way people pull together, trying to support each other, trying to, maybe it was to help themselves or just to give them more confidence or the ability. But I saw a lot of that, and it was quite overwhelming. It was like, wow, and then you saw the pollution die down, you saw all this kind of stuff around the world, and it's like, wow, is this Mother Nature trying to tell us something, But but then once, I don't know, the first lockdown, my anxiety, I was scared. I was scared of a lot of stuff. Then again, it's like, well, it happens again, wear the mask, blah, blah, blah. And then it get to the point where the last one was like, okay, is it over yet? Can we go back to normal?
Right.
But yeah, it's just there's different stages and different, it's something that you never thought would ever exist to happen in this,
It was such a new thing for all of us. And yeah, the anxiety levels were super high, especially when we're all reading the papers or know people who got it and were deathly ill or passed. So we knew right away that, people with anxiety or depression, it was going to spike them terribly. That combined with isolation, and we mentioned before about sunshine and socializing and exercise and all that's coming out the window. And by the way, I'm a big fan of history. And when you talked about that a moment ago, what came to my mind, and I'm not that old, by the way, but I was thinking of London or England during the Blitz, about everything I've read about how everybody just kept their spirits up and bonded, and everybody was getting bombed and many people dying, but there was a real cohesion and camaraderie. So when you said that, it kind of reminded me of that.
That's true, because they were in the air shelters singing songs, trying to entertain each other. Yeah, I didn't really think about that. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it's must be a human trait that we forget about.
Right.
Yeah.
But it takes this kind of crisis or emergency where maybe neighbors who never talk to each other, all of a sudden they're chatting, they have something to chat about, but there's also that sense of looking for human connection and kindness and relief.
Yeah.
So, I could see how that would have impacted you. Well, that's a silver lining, right?
Yeah, yeah. Isn't it amazing that people all around the world would have just done the same? And if you're the old country or an old country, I suppose they would have done the same. It's just one built into us, like human nature kind of thing.
Yeah.
Even though they're 1,000 miles or whatever apart in kind of things. I don't know.
Right. A shared human experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
And again, sad that it takes that to get us to have that kind of shared thing. But sometimes it does.
Yeah. That is the downside, isn't it? Yeah.
What helped you best to diminish depression and anxiety?
Well, the counsellor I'm seeing, she gave me these mental tools to work on. Like, imagine a tree. The roots below the tree are all the bad times, But then above the tree, it was like all the positives that were happening, all the things, good things that were happening. And then just imagining things in mind, just to put the jigsaws together, just something to focus on. Because I was the kind of person that if something bad happened, if I made one little mistake, that was the end of the world. It's like, oh my God, no. And I kept thinking, if I was going anywhere, plan A and then plan B, say if I got in the bus, would I get bullied? Because I got bullied a lot when I was at school. Would I get bullied? Would this happen, that happen? And that become my reality. Mm-hmm. And the real plan didn't exist. I was thinking all the bad things that would happen. And so the anxiety kept working on that all the time. But that's like in the past. I mean, I used to spend days losing sleep with anxiety problems, but now it's about half an hour, then I'm okay. It's, I don't know. I'm quite proud of what I've accomplished. I mean,
very good.
I'm more able to be myself and talk about it. I'm happy to talk about anything to do with what I've gone through, you know, if it helps anyone. But it's just the mental tools she gave me to work on when these things happen, like to knock the wall down, you know, to knock the barrier down, and to actually think. And because when I get bad anxiety days now, I can talk about it. Before I used to scream and if anyone talked to me, I used to feel like I was going to vomit. And I couldn't hear. I didn't want to listen to people. It just echoed in my mind, and it was horrible. But now it's like that doesn't happen. I could just, I've got a bit of a bad day, but I know it is, and I could talk about it, and then 10 minutes later, I'm okay.
That's great. Wow.
It's a weird process. I mean, I don't know how I managed to do it, but it's just one of the things that's now built into me to actually, you know, I don't realize I'm helping myself now. It's just natural. It's that natural process. I still get the bad days and good days, you know, but it's just like, okay, well, I'll face my fear. That's it. I've done it. Next task.
There you go. Excellent.
If you talked to me about 2 years ago, it would have been completely different. I would have been.
So it sounds like you've done a lot. You've done a lot.
This.
That's a lot of work that you've done. It sounds like.
Oh yeah, it's took a few years, but yeah.
Right. Well, and that's a great point for, again, anybody watching. It takes time. People say, how long does it take to diminish a negative pattern of thought, emotion, and behavior? Anxiety, shame, depression, people pleasing, guilt, whatever. And I say months and years. I do want to add something what you said, by the way. Again, in the interest of educating anybody that is watching or listening, is the difference between fear and anxiety and what anxiety actually is. So my understanding, the way it's been taught to me, and that I've researched, so fear is of something tangible. For argument's sake, you would have a fear of venomous snakes or a fear of thunderstorms, whereas anxiety is future-oriented, and you could think of it as synonymous with worry. And I always use the phrase with clients, what if, or what will be.
Yeah.
Right. And which is really fascinating when you think about it. And there's a great quote in Darren, I can't remember it, but something about we're fearful, we're scared of things that never were and never will be. Maybe you know that quote, but anyway. And so it sounds like you've done that too. You look at, is this fear reality based? It hasn't happened yet. Will it? And if it does happen, will it be horrific? Maybe not so horrific. And what will I do to cope and deal with it? So it sounds like you've been given a lot of those kind of tools.
Yeah, that was exactly what I was going through. Yeah.
Right.
So thinking about months ahead or weeks ahead, no, you know, I couldn't do it.
You also touched on something, you didn't use this name, but I'll give it a name, is catastrophizing, right?
Okay.
Where situations become catastrophic when they haven't even happened, or if they are going to happen, they're just not at that level. But you also said something interesting too, when people have a background, you mentioned being bullied. So when people, if I heard you right, so when people have those kind of experiences, it would be natural to develop anticipatory anxiety, that I feel the anxiety is going to come or the situation is going to come, and that creates, its own process. The wheels are going because you've had those experiences in the past. right? That I imagine you're probably looking over your shoulder or anticipating the worst. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I would just guess that maybe you had some of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's the human mind is a strange thing, isn't it?
It is
Yeah.
a strange thing, but you know, the interesting thing is, I'm going to kind of wind down a little bit here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Going back to the patterns work. So people are, and this is a cliche that I'm about to say, but the idea of people as snowflakes, in that we're all the same and yet we're all uniquely different in small ways or not so small ways. But I like the patterns work because it really gets down to the bedrock of how we are all alike. So people may seem endlessly different, and we have our variations and all that, and yet how many people, if not everybody, experiences at some point shame, guilt, caretaking, aggression, displaced anger, withdrawal, isolation, all those patterns. In that sense, kind of what you said before about how we came together with COVID, we all come together and go, you know what, you have that, I have that, you've had that, me too. People I've worked, and obviously I can't say names because of confidentiality, but in the Malibu work, I've worked with a number of very high profile people. And if you met them, you would say, oh my God, I mean, that guy, not only is he just like me, he's got a lot more issues than I have. I don't want that. That's what you see, that really everybody is really the same. That's another cliche, and yet it's true. You know, so
Yeah.
but I appreciate the questions, and I appreciate the chance to share a little bit and to meet you. And
Okay. Well, it has been a pleasure, a real big pleasure, and I'm still honoured that I'm into you. It's fantastic.
yeah,
So I'll put the links below to your books on Amazon and stuff like that, and all the books you mentioned, I'll put the links below as well. I'll find them in links and stuff. And yeah, wow.
Thank you. I appreciate the time as well. And again, I said I like you to meet new people and to hear their stories and to share a little bit. So
yeah,
it's appreciated. It's mutual.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, you're very welcome, Darren.
Take care.
Well, you take care too, and we'll be in touch.
Yes, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
So that was the interview. I hope you got something from it. I mean, got some information, and I said I was so impressed, so amazing that I got to do this. You know, even after 3 years, it still wows me that I got this interview. But yeah, hopefully I want to do more like this. I really do. So if you know anyone who wants to be interviewed, please, or yourself, you know, anyone in the field of mental health or anyone who's going through stuff and they're willing to talk about it, please email me and or send me or give me a message and be in contact. Anyway, thank you for watching all the way through, and if you did, type in thank you. Okay.